All right, we are getting the thumbs up, so we're going to go ahead and take off here. So I'm Ryan Bonsack, District Administrator for the Dodgeville School District, and this will be my first year taking on the position of the District Administrator, also taking on the role as high school principal. Been in the district, I think our family moved here in the early 2000s, and at that point, I was still going to college, my wife working at Land's End, and I quickly got involved with the city of Dodgeville, working for the parks, and then took on a role as a teacher and a coach. And one of the things that I quickly learned in this community is that when you surround yourself with many of the people that are sitting in the audience right now, great things can happen. And there's not a thing that we can't accomplish when we're working together. And that's one of the things that when I took on this role as district administrator and leading kind of the school side of it, and seeing that Barry was in this position as the mayor of Dodgeville, I got excited because I knew I wasn't alone. And I knew this was one of those journeys that we needed to get our kind of groups together because we can accomplish so much more. And so in that process, Barry and I have been meeting and trying to figure out ways that we can get an audience like this together to create some opportunities and also celebrate the great things that are going on in the Dodgeville community so that we can be proud of who we are and hopefully be able to continue to sell the message of the things we want to do in the future. So Barry, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, as Ryan said, I'm Barry Hotman, Mayor, City of Dodgeville. You know, for me, telling a little history, my family moved here in 1977, so this is home for me and has been for most of my life. And growing up near the schools, my dad was a district administrator. I have a sister-in-law who's just retired from 30 plus years in teaching. Education has been a part of my life. So as Ryan and I began to talk and say, you know, this isn't just about the city, and the city is separate from the hospital, and the city is separate from the schools. We are one community that we're trying to create a message, if you will, of choosing Dodgeville. And when I say choose Dodgeville, it doesn't mean that if you're not here, you choose Dodgeville. It's even though you live here, you choose Dodgeville. In the volunteering, the getting involved with the community, the way you talk about our community, the way you may talk about it on social media, all that matters. It matters. It matters what people think about our community. So we wanted to start having some conversations. There's obviously several issues that or challenges that we're faced with here in our community, and it's no different than any other small community in Wisconsin or Southwest Wisconsin for sure, where, you know, monies are tight at a school level, monies are tight at a city level, monies are tight at a county level. There's so many constraints on us, and it's difficult. So as we all try and make a better Dodgeville and choose Dodgeville, we thought, let's get together, have some conversations, and bring the community involved. Tonight, we're blessed to have 3 individuals that are come up here and just share some information that we think will just help get information for everyone to think about as we face some of the challenges as a community, not just as a school, not just as a hospital, but as a community in moving forward. And I hope that this starts the juices and everyone thinking about the situation we're in and how we can move forward and make a better community.
And with that being said, too, if you don't have something to write with, let us get you a piece of paper and a pencil, because as you go through this, we're hoping you will take notes, that there will be some ideas that are generated. This is only the first of these meetings. The goal out of this will be to continue to have more meetings and more conversations and get a larger audience. And so if you don't have one, we can get you a piece of paper and pencil to take some notes. We're excited to have the 3 individuals that are here tonight to help present some of the ideas that they've been grappling with over time. And I'd call them kind of local experts and a plethora of resources they provide for not only our community, but across the state and in any network they're associated with. So I think we can go ahead and get started.
Most definitely.
Thank you. So we'll start off. We've got Jamie Nutter. Jamie Nutter is out of CISA 3, and he'll come on up on stage and he'll have his presentation.
Well, thanks for having me. Jamie Nutter, Agency Administrator at CISA 3. For those of you not familiar with CISA, we serve 31 school districts in Southwest Wisconsin. covering 4,000 square miles, about 18,000 students, 4,000 teachers. And our role is the main part of our role is to provide a consortium because a lot of our smaller districts might only need a position 1 day a week, or they might need 2 days a week, or 2 hours a week. So we find hard to find positions and bring districts together so that we can hire people. We provide professional development so that our districts are engaged with best practices both in our state and nationally. We make those connections. And then we pool resources together for buying power. When you think about 18,000 students across 4,000 square miles, there are districts on the other side of the state that have that in one school district. So in order for us to compete, we have to work together. So my goal tonight, even though I am familiar with the state and regional perspective, is to kind of bring that story down to those of you who are choosing to participate. You know, we can solve problems when we know what they are. We can solve problems when we know the information, but it's the unknown that makes it hard for us, or making assumptions. So I hope from this presentation tonight that you'll learn a little bit about school funding in general, specifically in Southwest Wisconsin. Learn how we benefit tremendously from state aid, and then understand why the formula is called equalized aid. So I'm going to get right into this. These are facts that every school board member should know, every taxpayer should know about your district. So within the district, when you add all the land value up across the board in Dodgeville, it's about 1.1 billion. You have 1,150 members. That's not a student count, that's FTEs, and that's a 3-year average. But your wealth is determined by taking your equalized value divided by the number of students. So for you who like to do math, you can do that real quickly. 1.1 divided by 1,150, right? We got about $1 million value per member. And that's how you are determined of how wealthy you are in a district. Because of that, the state average is more than that, and I don't have the exact figure this year because that'll come out October 15th, but it's more than where you are in Dodgeville. And as a result of that, if it wasn't for state aid, you'd have to cover the whole levy. Instead, you're covering just a little bit over 40% of that, right? Or the state's covering 57%. So the state aid doesn't give more money to schools, it substitutes the levy. So when we hear that school finances are going up, or we hear that we're investing in our schools from the state level, it doesn't always mean that the school has more money to spend. The majority of that means that they are going to take the burden off of you and pay that bill on your behalf based on where you fall in the formula, based on your ability to pay. So I think the more accurate statement for state aid should be subsidized aid, because they subsidize your levy. These are just some important facts to get us started. So as we think about what land value, I mean, it's no secret what's happened the last couple of years with land values, right? We know that 10 years ago, a house was selling for $200,000, and it could be $380,000 or $400,000 today. But you can see since 1990 what the equalized value has done in the Dodgeville area. And that lies about the same trend as the state, right? So we're laying that trend right over the top. Also, this looks at the rate that you've been paying. And so when you look at from 2016 through 2023, the mill rate has dropped from 1151 back in 16 to last year. We don't have this year's. We won't know that till October 15th. But our latest data is $7.34. A lot of that can be attributed to a couple of things. One is declining enrollment. When you have declining enrollment, you have less of an ability to raise revenue. Secondly, because you have had some building additions, some upgrades, you funded those on the front side, and now as you make those payments, you get more state aid. So the state, the rest of the state, is helping pay for the very facility that we're in tonight, right? So otherwise, rural school districts or school districts in Southwest Wisconsin wouldn't be able to have these opportunities for our students. Think about this. In other areas of the state, I don't know that they could build this, but I do know that there are school districts that build things like practice fields, indoor practice fields, small additions without even having to go to the taxpayers. It's just built right into their budget. So equalized value gives opportunities for small school districts to be able to do the things that we provide for our students. So just from a historical perspective, and here's the purpose. Here's the purpose. In 1992, the sacrifice or the tax burden, however you want to look at it, the investment was much greater by individual taxpayers. A bigger portion of their income went to pay for school taxes. In fact, in 1992, the mill rate in Dodgeville was $21.94. So for every $100,000 of value, it would be $2,194. Today it's $734. Let's think about that for a second. The average home was worth $55,000 in 1992. So the taxes on that was about $1,206.70 with an average income of $25,000, right? Or 4.82% of the median income. Today, the average home is about $198,000 and the mill rate's at $734, and that average tax is $1,453.32, about 2.27%. So when we look at the percent change, right, it's 52%, almost 53% of a change of our income with that, of that investment. I always like to point that out, especially to some of our younger parents who are investing in their schools, to think about what the generations before us did to invest in our schools. But why is that, right? That's how dependent we are on state aid. If we didn't have 57% of the revenue of your levies being covered by state aid, your mill rate would be probably at $20-some at the value of your home today. You would pay a lot more in taxes. It would feel more like our neighbors to our south. Talk to them about their taxes. They don't have the state aid that we have. So these are just some important facts to understand. So to really be able to understand state aid, the whole concept of these last three slides was for you to understand that state aid is not money schools get to spend, but it's money that's being substituted for your property taxes. That is the whole purpose of state aid. So one of the issues that we're facing in Wisconsin, according to the latest statistic from Forward Analytics, which is the data arm of the Wisconsin Counties Association, by 2030, Wisconsin is going to be 150,000 workers short of what we need for the jobs. That's the turnover. So we're facing that in schools. We're facing that in all industry. So not only are we combining with historic inflation, but we're also trying to find teachers. We're trying to find employees. And this trend right here is a reflection of our population shortage that we're facing in Wisconsin right now. You can see in 12-13, we had membership. Again, this is not physical count. So for example, for membership for aid calculations, a 4-year-old kindergarten student is calculated at 0.6. An early childhood student is 0.5, right? So this isn't people in seats, students in seats. These are all of the students who, the 3-year average of all the students who attend a public school somewhere, whether it's in Dodgeville or somewhere else. That's the count in Dodgeville. And so when you look at all the students who attend a public school, 3-year average who live here, from 1213, we went from 1306 to 1172. Well, most people would say, well, we can take care of the problem pretty easy, right? I mean, it's like you have less enrollment, so you just pare your staff down. It doesn't work like that. It'd be nice if it was just all the 4th graders moved away one year, then we just get rid of 4th grade. But it's 7 students in kindergarten. It's 10 students in 1st grade. It's 8 students, you know, in all the other grades. And so and it doesn't happen all at once. It happens over time. And there's more demands on schools, right? There's every problem there is, right? We solve it here, right? It's the center of our community. It's where the resources are. So as we think about this, our enrollment's dropped, but our responsibility hasn't. But our aid is based on, our revenue limit is based on student counts. In Dodgeville, it's over $12,000 a student. You can do the math on the revenue loss that Dodgeville is facing. I'm having these same conversations across Southwest Wisconsin with the people I serve, and they're all experiencing about the same thing. So just kind of a review of how your levy is determined. And the revenue limit is based on the number on your revenue limit per student times the amount of students to give you a revenue limit. So you calculate a revenue limit. I'm using the best data that I could. Again, we don't know that till it's certified October 15th, but it's approximately 13.6 million. And this rectangle represents your revenue limit. Think about filling it up. And it's filled up with 2 parts, which I've just went ad nauseum about state aid. So that's part of it, right? State aid. And the second part of that is whatever is left, the local taxpayers bridge the gap between state aid and that revenue limit. So, you know, if you've ever watched those game shows where they go, all right, come on, big money here, big money, and they want to see that raise up, that's what we want to do in this next part, because we want more state aid, because we want that gap to be smaller, because it makes our burden less. So let's do this big money thing right here. State aid, 7.5 million. Okay, there it is, and we have to fill the rest in. So without that, your levy would fill this whole thing up. Instead, your levy is completing it, right? 45%. So a lot of times I hear, well, the formula is broken. We need more money from the state. Well, we don't need more money from the state necessarily, because all that would do is it would increase the blue part and your red part would shrink. What we need is that top line to go up to take care of the historic inflation that we've experienced. A misconception is whatever you do at the annual meeting and what you have for a revenue limit is what you're going to pay. But that mill rate that gets approved at the budget hearing and the annual meeting is only part of it. And that's only part of the aid. We also call the school levy credit part of school aids. So when we hear historic increases in school aids, they're counting the state aid that substitutes for that, as well as the school aids that's on your property tax bill. Anybody who's paid property taxes is pretty familiar with this format. This isn't one from here, it's just an example. But if you look up at, in this top box, I have it highlighted in blue in the top right corner. You can see in this particular case, there's an arrow that goes down to $255.91. So we said your mill rate was a little over $7. It's equalized. That's the average. Depending on what your municipalities do for assessments, you're going to have an average of that. But then it's going to go down even more on the backside. So oftentimes we refer to state aid as the relief, taxpayer relief we get on the front side. The credit's what we get on the backside. For those districts that are richer than ours, they're going to get a bigger credit. So in other areas of the state, they don't necessarily get as much state aid on the front side, but they get more on the back side. And because they have more equalized value to spread out that levy, their mill rate is going to be far less than what you pay. I'll give you one example. Lakeland Union High School is in Minocqua. If you've ever went up north, you know that a $200,000 home in Dodgeville is going to be worth $600,000 in Minocqua, right? In that area on a lake. But you're going to pay on school taxes about $1,400 on your $200,000 home. Same exact home, it's just worth more on the lake. That home's going to be worth, let's say, $800,000, give or take. They're probably going to pay somewhere around $800 to $1,000 for that because of the tax base and how it's spread over. That's why it's called equalized, right? It equalizes that tax rate. My final slide is I want you to have an understanding of what our schools have been going through for the last 10 years. If we look at the series of numbers on the left side, it reads revenue limit adjustments. So every year we multiply the members times the amount per student on a revenue limit formula. And that's different in every district. A lot of it depends on what happened in 1992. And that was the baseline that all the schools started with. So whatever your district decided to do had a big impact on what's happening in Dodgeville. I have some school districts that are at the low revenue ceiling, which is going to be $11,300 per student, all the way up to $18,000 per student that they get for revenue limit authority. So for every year, they bump that up. For example, last year it was $11,000 for the low revenue ceiling. We got the authority to go up to $325 per student. So if it was 11 last year, it's 11,325. It was 11,325, goes to 11,650, right? So that's the amount that it goes up. That's how we determine, that's how we take care of the budget, is on those increases. There are categorical aids that are outside of the formula that the state gives us for other things. But the majority of the revenue that we have in schools is based on the revenue limit authority. And so you can see that of the last 10 years, we had 6 occasions where it was frozen. That would be great if the expenses froze, but that wasn't the case. So now when you look below, that stair step represents inflation. And so when we start in 15-16, we had 1.62 inflation, followed by 0.12, basically 1/10% increase in inflation. You can see that cruised around between 0 and 2%. So when we got when we didn't have this and we got some categorical aid increases, school districts were able to make ends meet as long as their enrollment wasn't declining too much. Most of them were able to do that. But where our schools, so 29 of the 31 school districts in Southwest Wisconsin have gone to referendum in the last 5 years or are planning to go to referendum this year, because they have to have voter authority to get more revenue to pay for the expenses. This is the part that's gotten us to this point. So in our 21-23 biennium, we were coming off the pandemic. There was a lot of federal support to get schools up and running. We wanted to get away from virtual back to face, in person. There was a lot of fear and a lot of expenses that schools had to get that started. And so we had the ESSER money and the GEARS money, right? So the federal government just gave schools money. They also gave the governor some money, which our governor chose to give more money to the schools with the expenses. And in our area, that averaged, depending on how people fell in the federal formula, anywhere from $600 per student up to as high as some other school districts had $1,100 per student. And the logic from the legislators was that on a typical year, if a school district got $200 to $250, they could make ends meet. And from the legislative leaders, they said, well, okay, if they could make it work with $200 to $300, they ought to be able to make it work with $600 to $1,200, right? So that was the logic. So schools didn't get any new money in 21, 22, or 22, 23, period. They had federal dollars, so they were able to make that work. While that was happening, however, we saw inflation creep up. So on the very next year, in order to replace that fiscal cliff, because we had reoccurring expenses and had one-time money to cover it, so that those federal dollars bridged that gap, got us from our base up to meet those expenses, and then it was gone. So now we're back down to the same base level that we were in 2021. So now we had to make up for all of the expenses we incurred from 21 to 23 with the amount of resources we were given from state and local resources. We needed about $654 per year in each of those years to make up for those federal dollars that left, in addition to the inflation we faced. We got $325 per student in each of those years, plus 3% in special ed reimbursement, when we needed about 40% or 50% in combination with that $650. That's why 29 of our 31 school districts are going to referendum, right? Because we didn't get the authority. The school districts are having to ask local people to support their schools. In addition to this, not only did we need 654, we had historic inflation. We got slammed with 4.7% inflation. If you turn on the TV and hear about the election, don't we hear about inflation every single day? It's no secret. But here's the facts. 4.7% CPI, followed by 8%, followed by 4.37. Historic. Look at what all the inflation did all the years before, and we get slammed with historic inflation at a time when we had a fiscal cliff and we didn't get enough money to fill in the gap. So my total intention here isn't to say the legislators did something wrong here, right? They were using this as an opportunity to balance their budget from their logic. I don't think they were banking on the fact that we were going to hit historic inflation. But here's what I will say, that in Dodgeville, for example, we have 55% of our total revenue comes from the state. And I hear people all the time pointing fingers, saying, oh, we need more support from the state. And I don't think people are really clear about what they need, what they want. Basically, what people are saying when they say that is, we need more revenue limit authority. And what the state is saying, no, we're not going to give you permission to raise taxes. If your local community wants to do that, they can do that. But we're already, in Dodgeville, we're already giving you 55%. You want us to give you 57%, but you don't, it's your school. You don't want to come up with the other 2% that you need, right? So I'm not trying to be condescending, but I also think that there needs to be kind of a balanced narrative when we're looking at the numbers. In some of our districts, the state is covering 70% of that. And so when you look at what's happening at the local level, and when we think about 1992, where we were at 4.8%, where the generations before were covering that, we're at 2%, And now our school districts, in order to be able to provide a quality education, be able to recruit teachers, be able to keep teachers, be able to operate buildings, be able to take care of 4.7, 8.09, and 4.37%, the math is just not going to work out. So it's not about pointing fingers, it's about a math problem. And there are procedures that have to be in place to solve the math problem. And I think as you start looking at your numbers, this is not the Dodgeville story, this is the Wisconsin story right here. And unfortunately, you can't escape the Wisconsin story because you're part of Wisconsin. And that's where we are, right? So those are the numbers. Those are, I'm not trying to spin, I'm not trying to convince, I'm just laying out some numbers so that smart people in your communities can make some logical decisions based on what you're faced with. I don't know if anybody has any questions. All right, thank you.
All right. Good evening, I guess, everybody. My name is Carl Green, and I'm with the Local Government Education Program, which is part of the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. Extension's goal and mission is to provide the resources of the university to the general public. Most universities, you have to enroll in a university to get a university education. Extension is the portion that tries to provide educational resources of the university to the general public. And my specific clientele base are local units of government. Historically, that has been towns, villages, cities, and counties. We are getting some work from school districts, some requests for either facilitation or a little bit of help with some of the working through intergovernmental agreement type work. It's certainly an area that could be explored, but it's typically not something that we had put a lot of work in. I want to try to talk today about the Dodgeville side. So Jamie did a great job laying out the impacts of property taxes and the way that property taxes work on the school district side. I would like to try to now take it on to the municipality side. And so we're going to talk about the levy of the mill, the difference between an assessment and appraisal, what's assessment ratio, and that's going to be something that's very important as you start looking at your different communities that are within multiple taxing jurisdictions like a school district or like your technical college. And we'll talk a little bit about equalized value. Equalized value is not the same thing as equalized aid, for which Jamie was talking about. Equalized value is the way that we sort of figure out in a portion how much costs go for these multiple taxing jurisdictions to be paid for. The state of Wisconsin is kind of interesting. If you go over into Minnesota, your assessor is on a countywide basis. So they do the assessing based on the county. So the entire county has an assessor that goes through and determines value. In the state of Wisconsin, we do that on a local municipal level. So your towns hire an assessor, your villages hire an assessor, your cities hire an assessor. So it's usually done on either the local municipal level, whether that's town, village, or city. However, then that reflects how much cost goes into what gets covered by your levy. This is just an illustration, and I think Jamie was showing this again on the school district side. This is an example of a county budget. This is actually Vernon County. And what you can see is that their total revenues, while it's $13 billion, billion in total revenues, only a portion of that is supported by the levy. There's a lot of state aid that comes into a county. Municipalities are the same way. They're getting some state aid called shared revenues. The problem is that shared revenues hasn't changed since 2012. It remained flat. and we saw historic inflation during that period of time. When we talk about the mill rate, I think there's a lot of confusion on mill rate and how does the mill rate tie into the levy. The levy is simply the portion of your budget that's going to be supported by the local property taxes, by the local taxpayer. Your levy divided by your total assessed value, which is the adding up every single property that has valuation in it in your community, in your taxing jurisdiction. And the mill rate then is the product of that. So when your community spends more, this goes up, that would cause your mill rate to go up. But when you have a lot of value that's being gained, whether you're getting new construction or you're getting just appreciation in value, the more that this part of the equation goes up, the mill rate will go down. And so that's why we see mill rates start to go down as we've seen valuations go up so much, because the bottom portion of the equation there has gone up. So we hear a lot about net new construction, and what is the purpose of net new construction? Well, back in 2012, the state started to put restrictions on what local units of government could do to raise their levy. And they said you can only raise it, I think in 2012, they said by 2% or your net new construction, whichever is higher. They then, I don't remember the exact timing, but they basically said it has to only be at your net new construction or zero. And so if you had a negative net new construction, you'd be at zero. You couldn't raise your levy. If you had a positive net new construction, you could only increase your levy by whatever that net construction amount is. So when we say net new construction, it's this annualized number representing all the growth of tax base that you've had, not appreciation in tax base, but growth. So new construction, less any removal demolition that occurred to facilitate that construction. So if you had a $200,000 house and you had to tear that down, you built a $2 million Quick Trip establishment, your net new construction would be $1.8 million. So that is just the percentage, whatever that net new construction is the percentage of your equalized value, is the limit that you can raise your levy. This is, and again, Jamie's data illustrated this as well. The problem is that the inflation went up so much and our net new construction didn't go up that much. Now this, we put together a paper with Extension, the Wisconsin Counties Association, the League of Wisconsin Municipalities, and the Wisconsin Towns Association, trying to articulate this message to the state legislature to say that there's an issue here where our costs are going up higher than the ability to eclipse those costs. And so I put this data together for every municipality. And what I did is I aggregated all their net new construction yearly. And then I compared that with the inflation rate for the range of data that I had from 2011 to 2022. This is for Iowa County. So these are all the municipalities in Iowa County. Barneveld and Muscoda actually had inflation less than their net new construction. Everybody else was less than that. There was actually 64 municipalities in the state of Wisconsin out of 1,800 or so municipalities, 64 that had net new construction that was above the inflation rate between 2011 and 2022. So about 3% of our municipalities fared okay from that policy. The other 97% are trying to figure out how to financially work through that. So this is what's called a statement of assessment. And this represents the city of Dodgeville's tax base. And so these are what they call real estate land classes. And so the main ones that you'll see in Dodgeville are residential and commercial. Residential and commercial, residential represents 68%. So if you took this number, divided it by your total tax base, how much is residential? It's about 68%. The rest, commercial, is I think 27%. So you take this number, divide it again by this total tax base, it's about 27%. 97% of your property tax base is in your residential and your commercial. In 1995, the state of Wisconsin enacted a policy. They wanted to try to help farmers, give farmers property tax relief. So they started assessing property ag property based on its use rather than its value. And that helps farmers that are in particular around urban areas where they're seeing really high property values going up just because of speculation. And so use value actually removed a significant amount of the agricultural property tax base and shifted it over to all the remaining property tax classes. That is part of why there's so much value in your residential, because they've removed all this ag property that used to have value and no longer has that much value. So you can see for the you're not going to have a lot of ag in a city as it is, but there's about $172,000 of value in the city of Dodgeville that's ag land. Represented another way, this is just a graphic of your tax base. Blue is residential, red is commercial, very little manufacturing. So you're putting all the property tax burden on your residential class and your commercial class. Couple of things that I like to explain. I said that a municipality does the assessing. So they determine everybody's valuation based on what the market value should be. But many times towns in particular don't have enough sales of homes. They don't have enough stuff going on, market pressures going on. And it's very hard for them to determine what that ongoing and changing market value is. And so oftentimes what'll happen is they are catching new homes, new builds. They maybe are doing any remodels, but that's about it in regards to the maintenance of the assessment roll. And what happens is the assessment roll starts to get out of date with regard to the market value. And then that starts to cause this thing, the average assessment ratio, to go down. When that's happening, you're getting variation between property taxpayers on how much they're getting assessed, and you're getting a lot of inaccuracy where somebody might be being assessed at a 70% of total value, and somebody else might be assessed at 95% of total value. You don't want to have that type of a situation. If on your property tax bill, this average assessment ratio is going down, that means there's a lot of variability between what property taxpayers are paying. They do estimate a estimated fair market value. This is done by the state of Wisconsin, and they do create these equalized values because of the fact that we have individual assessors determining value in every municipality. They need to have a guide to how close is that to the true market value. So they're receiving from every single assessment district all the records of any land sales, of any property sales. And they look and see what those property sales are market-based. Sometimes you'll have property sales between a known buyer and a known seller. My dad sells me a piece of land. That's not really a market-based sale. So they throw those out and they statistically determine what is the valuation change, and they determine an equalized value or a full market value. And then they compare what is the assessor of your community say is the value compared to that equalized value. That difference is that average assessment ratio. And so they use the equalized value to apportion out how much of county services does the city of Dodgeville pay for? How much of the school district of the city of Dodgeville does the city of Dodgeville pay for? So equalized value plays a role in helping to apportion out those multiple taxing jurisdictions like a school district, like a tech college, or your county, to make sure that it's apportioned fairly and accurately. I talked about use valuation. There's also MFL programs for managed forest land, which also allows forest lands to be taxed at a different rate. So that's kind of the way it is. And I'm going to try to just go through this really quickly. You know, one thing I'd like to point out, you see your property tax bill, and there's usually 4 taxing jurisdictions on there, but you're writing your check to your local municipality. And oftentimes when people are complaining, they're complaining to the clerk when they're writing their check, and the clerk is like, hey, we're like 10% of this property tax bill, but they're receiving that burden because the perception is that the city of Dodgeville is getting all that money. The city of Dodgeville takes the money that the total tax bill is for, they split it up between county, tech college, and the school district. I don't notice any special improvement districts like a lake district, a sanitary district. Sometimes if you live in those special improvement districts, you also have that on your property tax bill. I also wanted to just kind of dispel this issue of if we go through, we reassess everybody, which is a requirement that the Department of Revenue has for property municipalities. And if you see this valuation change, that's going to automatically cause your property taxes to go up. That's not the case. Again, your mill is your levy divided by your total assessed value. When you increase your total assessed value, you have the ability to reduce your mill. So this black line shows 1 year and then the second year after a revaluation happened. So these are the 7 property owners in this fictitious community. And this is what they're assessed at. Their individual assessment ratio, or what their value compared to the full market value is calculated individually here. And we get the total assessed value being this, and they're at about an 83% assessment ratio. They got 6.4% of net new construction, so they increased their levy by that amount. Their levy was this, they increased it to this. They did the revaluation. These are the new values in red, so you can compare what the value was in yellow from the year before to the new value and how much that assessment ratio has changed. But the big thing that you want to look at is the taxes due and the difference. And what we see here is that when you had this assessment ratio that was so low, you were getting variations in what people were paying. This person is paying almost 90% of the full market value. This person is paying 77. Whoops. And when we move over to here, everybody's within about 5% or so, and that's more accuracy. And what happened to people's property taxes? Most people saw a pretty significant change in the valuation, but their difference actually didn't go up that much. Sorry about that. The big, I think, thing to point out is that for somebody like Mike, who was paying a higher portion of that property tax previous to the revaluation, they have seen a very small difference. The point being is that municipalities don't have the ability to manipulate your taxes and make you pay more by just raising your value. When they raise your value, your mill rate drops and the amount due isn't going to change that much. Boy, I'm not getting this clicker thing. Here's my contact information and email. If you have any questions, we'll move it on to Troy, but I wanted to put that up there. Thank you.
Thank you. How do I present this, Barry? Slideshow? Hey, all right. I'm Troy Magid. I'm the Executive Director of the Southwestern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. And I'm going to talk about the theme tonight, which I love, Choose Dodgeville. Just a primer on Southwest Regional Planning. We're based in Platteville, been around since 1970. We do all that stuff on the left. I got some of the best staff you'll ever meet. They're brilliant. And we serve this region on the right, population 11,000 in Monroe to population 52 Yuba. So we do all that cool stuff on the left, and we do it here in the vernacular in Southwest Wisconsin. Before I start, Jacob Nelson, would you raise your hand? Jacob is my data guru. He's helped me with this and challenges me on a lot of stuff, so I appreciate him coming tonight. So this is what I'm going to talk about, right? What does it mean, choose Dodgeville? Who's doing the choosing? Who should choose? Who's not choosing? And then, frankly, why Dodgeville? I'm not from here, so when we moved to Wisconsin, it's a good question. Why would we choose Platteville, Dodgeville, or anywhere else? So I'm going to offer an outsider's view of your community to some degree. So in terms of starting on choice, I want to go through some current conditions. These are some data slides I'll move through pretty quick.
trusting you'll get some of this. Population change over the last decennial census. These are census numbers. You'll see the percentage change on the right. The region overall dropped by about 0.3%. Grant County had a booming growth of 1.4, and then Richland lost 4%. That's pretty catastrophic loss in Richland County. Mapped around Iowa County, this is what it looks like. On this slide and all the rest, growth is blue, decline is red. So you can clearly see the Dane County influence across the county. Going through what that means, who's changing and how. Here's your total numbers. Again, on this slide and the future ones, the red dotted line are population projections. Again, Jacob's beautiful work. You'll see here in fuzzy numbers, we had just a slight decline overall Dodgeville population, projected to have just a little bit of a bump going to 2030. These I'll move through a little quicker. Youth population is declining, has for the last 10 years, and projected some further decline in total youth population. Workforce population, age 20 to 64, flatlining, projected to decline. Age 65 plus, we're doing great there. That's like a 39% increase or something. I had the number written down, and math is not my strong suit. You can do the number. We had a huge increase over the last decade and projected as well into the next decade. Why is that? A bunch of reasons. This got a formatting issue. These are birth rates, live births per 1,000 population. Folks aren't having babies anymore. Jack Sowers, the county board chair down in Lafayette County, he says, when I was a kid, the bus stopped at 2 places, at the Sauer household and the neighbor household. Then the bus was full, right? Catholic farm families. Right? Doesn't happen anymore. We have 2021. We've got some kind of a COVID baby boom there, but overall we're dropping pretty precipitously. Holy smokes. So Dodgeville school enrollment. I don't know what happened here, folks. I apologize. Oh, shucks, Ryan. I wonder if there's a download issue. So the overall enrollment, I go a little further than Jamie to 01. As you can clearly see, the Dodgeville school enrollment was down about 15%. And I will say, by the way, up here I have slides with the data on it and Jacob's beautiful data packet if you want to take it. It's up here next to a bunch of regional planning propaganda. You take that as well. So 15% decline in 23 years is not dissimilar than most of our region. These little blurbs are school districts during that same 23-year period. Red is an enrollment decline and blue is an enrollment growth, right? So while Dodgeville in the center is pink, you can see Port Cassville at a 54% enrollment decline, right? You can see Albany over here in Greene County, the 2 darker reds, and then Black Hawk. So again, I bring this up. Nobody's doing anything right or wrong. This is not a Dodgeville or a Wisconsin issue. I would say this is a rural America condition, right? So the question is, what do we do with this baby? Of course, it trickles through our workforce. I apologize again, but the numbers, this is labor force. The labor force from 05 has been down pretty consistently, although in Iowa County, the actual labor force has remained constant probably for the last decade with a couple of bumps. I can tell you if I gave this slide to you and you could read it for Richland County, that overall blue line, which is your labor force in Richland and Crawford, never go back up. It's just continually down, right? So we have some challenges. If you're in the workforce or you're an employee, you certainly know this overall number. I wanted to move through that fast. I hope that you're aware of some of these trends as you look around. If you don't, pick up the newspaper or go to a think tank and they're all telling us what to do or think about it, right? So overall, this is our current condition, not just in Dodgeville and Iowa, but across the region. And so this is one of the underlying reasons why we need to think about who should choose and who would choose Dodgeville or any of our communities. Aging population, some decline overall in people, birth rate decline, workforce shortage, and school enrollment. It just ripples through the economy. Dang on it. So in terms of workforce, I think the people shortage is the workforce shortage. I'll have the rest of my career dealing with this. About 10,000 baby boomers turn 65 each year, right? There's nothing magic about 65. I will be working beyond 65. But we generally look at 65 as that litmus test of when folks think about some change of life, retirement, whatever, right? That number, incidentally, is 10,000 baby boomers. There's a sign outside of Platteville. The workforce is trying to figure out what the heck to do about this. If you're an employer, you've probably bumped into this. inability to meet production, supply, demand, poaching. Sometimes you'll get one district administrator come to a community and they want to poach another employee. It never happens around here, but we always have poaching of employees. I have a hard rule to not do it. Overtime and premium pay, if you talk to jailers, right, nurses, some of these people are putting out a lot of money. To me, as an employee and a director, those last two are really shocking. Loss of institutional knowledge and stability. You cannot innovate if you're constantly retraining and hiring. Profound productivity impacts. So why do we want somebody to choose Dodgeville? Jamie mentioned this. We have constantly rising costs due to inflation. Constant. Our revenue streams are often declining and variable. So you lose 20 kids, you still need that one fixed cost of a fourth grade teacher because you didn't lose 20 fourth graders, right? We need also a property tax to spread some of these expenses out. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to now build off what Carl shared about net new construction. You remember Carl's slide with Barneveld and Muscadet, the two communities whose net new construction outpaced inflation? Those are profound anomalies, as you saw there. And the reasons are Vortex Optical and Meister Cheese. Muscadet is primarily in Grant County, except for that sweet industry park, right? Meister Cheese makes every drop of cheese for Chipotle around the nation. So in those wonderful anomalies, there are communities that are beating inflation. Dodgeville is not one. This is Dodgeville's trend of net new construction. The average was about 0.6%. 0.6% on average is how much the city could raise its levy. We've had wonderful 5 out of the last 6 years. They're beating their average, but they're not at 2%. 2% is kind of what I put out there. It used to be what the Federal Reserve said. We should keep inflation at 2%. We're still not meeting their pie in the sky desire, right? So I want to put this in kind of layman's terms, economic development terms. A couple of things. The city government, Mayor Hotman, he does not buy consumer price index stuff. That's that basket of goods and services that we people buy. The city buys culverts going up at 200%. Fuel, diesel fuel going up at 57% inflation, right? These are from the Wisconsin Counties Association. So why we think CPI is going up, if you're in government business, some of your unit costs are going up profoundly higher than CPI. So here's an exercise. What does this mean? What is CPI? What is 2%? What are we actually going to buy? And how much growth do we need? So let's do a thought exercise. City of Dodgeville wants or needs to raise its levy by 2%. Let's say that is a goal. Their net new construction on my previous slide. So they need to raise their levy by 2%. They need $10 million, $10.3 million of property value in 23 to raise their levy by 2% in 24. $10.3 million of property. They actually only had just over $4 million of new property value, right? 0.78. So that means in order for Mayor Hotman, welcome to the job, to get 2% levy increase, he needs an additional $6.3 million of new property in 2023 to raise his levy by 2%. And then, you got to do it in next year as well. And the year after, and the year after, right? What is that amount of money? That's about 2 quick trips here in town. If you look at your tax roll, 6.3 million is about 4 culverts here in town. It's almost a full Walmart. That's how much $6.3 million is you'd have to get in addition to property tax growth every single year, right? Dodgeville's not alone when we look at the county level. Larry Berkey, county administrator's in the back. Larry has to go find the property values worth of 2 full Walmarts every single year to raise county levy by 2%, right? Greene County has to find property value worth 3 New Glarus breweries, which would be awesome to have 3 New Glarus breweries every single year. But that's a pile of property tax, right? I'm not saying we're going to get 2 Walmarts a year, but I'm trying to give you a visual image of the volume of property tax we need, of property base we need to raise the levy 2%. This is the impact of, as Carl explained, these levy limits that were put on communities. It's profound. Taxes go up. Revenue is variable. We're declining, right? So we need people to choose Dodgeville to spread out these costs. So now we're going to act like we're a resident. Who's a resident of Dodgeville, city of Dodgeville? Okay. Any non-city school district residents? Non-city residents of the school district? Okay, cool. So So when I work with cities or villages, and I do this a lot, as you saw, we need to think exactly like Ryan and Barry are doing, which is not the city go out and issue debt for a new road construction while the school goes out and issues debt for a new building or operating levy. And then Mr. Berkey builds a jail, right, and puts it on the tax roll. We only have so much money, all of us. And as we're getting older on fixed income, right, we have to think about, as a resident, the type of residence we have. Where are they going to spend their money, right? And where can they choose to spend their money? I would say Alliant Energy raises its rates. I have no say over that, right? I can't choose to not pay my electric bill. I have no choice if that goes up. The city can raise its utility rates, water rates, and it should. And if they do a big project, the Public Service Commission makes them raise the utility rates. So as a voter and a resident, I have no control over that. Inflation is what it is, no control. Healthcare costs, my health insurance premiums are going up 18% next year. I have no control over that. Can I control property taxes? So can we vote the bums out if they're raising our taxes? So this was a misconception that we bumped into quite a bit, to steal some of Carl's thunder. A very, very simplification of how my property tax bill is generated. The tax levy, as Carl explains, total city expenses minus non-tax revenue, fees, fines, whatever, permit fees, up to that levy limit, right? So that's your levy. Again, as Carl mentioned, the mill rate is your levy divided by all the city's assessed value. And then that mill rate you just generated is applied to my property value, right? Am I correct? Simplification. But that's how my property tax bill is generated. Mayor Hopman doesn't spend another penny on anything the rest of his life. The mill rate doesn't ever change the rest of my life. Whew, my no changes floated away. If the tax rate does not change at all, but my property value goes up, my tax bill goes up. The city can be as fiscally conservative as any city possibly can forever for the rest of their life. And if your house value goes up in these times, in these economies, your tax bill goes up, right? Why? Because housing supply shortage, workforce shortage, and so forth. Incidentally, shameless plug. Oh, no. We're having a housing forum here tomorrow morning. I've got a flyer up here for you. So why do we need to choose Dodgeville? Mrs. Kish, my math teacher, told me that if we don't move the numerator and the denominator goes up, the quotient will go down, right? So if we increase the total property value in the city, it'll spread that tax burden around on more payers, right? So that's why, in economic development terms, we need to grow the village. Costs go up. We need more payers, more property tax, right? So that's one of the things in our economic and community development world. Why do we want to chase new home construction, new businesses? We got to keep up with paying the bills. So I would say we don't really have a choice on property taxes. Your residents can do really a couple of things. They can choose to leave. They can relocate. They can move away if they think it's too expensive. We know that school enrollment is a choice, right? School choice exists. So this map is school districts, and each of these red or blue blurbs are net open enrollment. The sum of the kids open enrolling into a district minus those open enrolling out of a district. And there is profound mobility between schools. Wide discussion on whether this can be controlled, whether we actually know why it's happening, but it is huge. You can see Richland School District is losing in 1 year 192 kids. That's almost $2 million of state aid, or of the aid tied to these students. It's getting shipped elsewhere, Ithaca and Kickapoo, because where the kids go, the money goes, right? So whether it's right or wrong that a kid likes Dodgeville or kids like Richland, if they relocate, they take their money with them, right? This is a horrible graph where the data didn't go through. Man, I should be fired. And this is my fault, not Jacob's. Jacob's work was brilliant. There's something in the transfer of the files, and I apologize to you all. This trend line here is the net open enrollment for Dodgeville schools. We're over at like 92 here on the right, leaving the district net. And I almost didn't put this in, but it's year one. And Ryan, in our conversations, not shied away from this inheritance and this great opportunity to bring these kids home. However that happens, right? Also, as you saw, this is a regional issue, right? So kids are choosing where they're going. So you can relocate. You can also vote on referenda. I can't vote on the jail. I can't vote on my taxes, right? So as we think, and this is what I love about Ryan and Barry coming together, right? We're actually all thinking about the resident together, not separately. So I can't control all this stuff. If I'm a 65, 70-year-old fixed income person, of which we have more and more and more, and I'm an empty nester, my kids aren't in a school, where am I going to spend my money? Because I can't control all these rising costs until I go to the voting booth for that operating referendum. And I think folks are trying to decide. So this is the trend of operating referenda in Southwest Wisconsin, going back to 2010. Again, Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction results 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%. 2023, 33% passing. 2024, April, 55% passing. 2 data points don't make a trend line. Let me be very clear. I'm not projecting a sea change. We also have a lot more coming up in November, right, Jamie? There's a whole pile of referenda coming up in November. So this is a partial 2024 data set. In my world, in the world of strategy, we'll say these are clearly outliers, right, in the trend line. And there's 2 things an outlier could be. It could be something that will never happen again, and it's an anomaly. There's something strange going on. Or it could be the tip of the spear of the data trend changing, right? I have no idea what this is. We'll find out in 3 years. But this is a profound and staggering jump off, right? Forward Analytics, as Jamie mentioned, the data branch of Wisconsin counties did this analysis for the whole state of Wisconsin. And so this trend line is mirrored around the state of Wisconsin for rural districts. So why do we need people to choose Dodgeville? To keep our schools solvent, to keep people here, right? Brief strategy thought. I share some stuff that folks don't always like to see, or it's kind of hard to see. The reality is, and Barry and Ryan know this, is a good strategy has to look the world in the face that is, right? So residents and students have choice, and we are all in competition. School districts are in competition with one another. Mr. Bonsack's not going to neighboring districts and poaching, right? We're above that. Barry's not going to Mineral Point and poaching. But the reality is residents coming to your districts have choice. And we want them to choose Dodgeville, right? Being the best school, being the most beautiful downtown, whatever the thing is. Strategy requires that folks we want to attract here have choice to go elsewhere, right? And we've got to think critically about that. Because these cats are out there. This is about 5 houses down from my house. And we can chuckle about it and we can say, oh, they're fuddy-duddy. People are struggling. We need to be empathetic to the base of the folks out there. Folks are struggling. We need to be empathetic towards that as we ask them to make investment decisions, right? So those are my thoughts on why do we care if they choose us or not. The question for you all then is, why should anybody choose Dodgeville, right? Look at this beautiful family. They're not from here. They're from Ohio. When someone moves to your community, they bring a whole pile of goodness, right? Workforce, consumers, tax base, school enrollment. Those 3 beautiful children are somewhere in the neighborhood of $45,000 of state aid to Platteville School District, right? Volunteer base. I could name you a couple of EMS districts that are having trouble responding to calls because they don't have volunteers, right? It's a rural America problem. It's not a Dodgeville problem. So how do we get them there? We behave like private business. We think about what we're going to have to offer them. And this is kind of step 1 of strategy. What's the value proposition as we would define it and thinking about communities? The value proposition, as I would define it, is thinking about what you have to offer someone, who you're going to target to bring here, and at what relative cost, right? So this is a corporate, private sector, competitive strategy tool. Anything you buy, if the business is worth a darn, has applied this to their product, right? Somewhere in the world, someone's driving a Maserati, and the Maserati Motor Company had somebody in mind to buy that $1 million car, right? You did not have in mind the middle-aged dads in Platteville, right? The minivan crowd, right? I'm their bird, right? They're coming courting for me. So I'm not the Maserati customer, right? I'm the minivan customer. And then the question is it Toyota? Is it, right? So we navigate when they make these decisions, and they know this stuff. And so we need to think about competition the way they do to some degree. My questions as we move into the next project, the next mapping, is a couple things. Number 1, this is something I think, and I love Jamie's comments.
The more we value things outside of our control, the less control we have. To me, this stoic mindset is core to strategy. We can't throw a fit at state aid not keeping up. We don't control it, even if it should, right? We don't have any control over net new construction. What do we control in our day-to-day lives and agency? And that's why this tool here is so powerful, this value proposition. Focus on what we control to get folks here. So when we work with cities and villages at Southwest Regional Planning, we say, okay, who do you want to come here, right? You have limited resources to put into attraction campaigns. You want empty nesters? Maybe, that's great. Do you want families, right? Do you want millennials and young folks? And then what do you have to offer them? Good paying jobs, maybe there's beautiful amenities like the state's greatest state park 5 miles north of your community, right? We have a lot of communities that have absolutely, in Southwest Wisconsin, this is my opinion, as a 46-year-old guy who's not from here, we got a lot of communities that have nothing to offer young families who aren't from here, right? Much less if you're a person of color or LGBTQ or anything else. We have a lot of communities that have nothing to offer those people, right? They can change that. I mean, it's beautiful. The region is gorgeous. Village of Cassville, if you've been there. It's a tough town. They're losing profound numbers of population enrollment. But look at this. It's along the Mississippi. They have access to all these parks and hunting grounds. 400 meg speed download, thanks to the 2 power plants that used to be there. There's nowhere else in the region that's 400 meg speed download. Low cost of living, easy commute. This would be, if I was drafting a value proposition, that's the bird I want to go to Cassville, right? So how do we think about our target audience and the people they come? And there's a few families moving in there to Cassville. Likewise, if you're at a school, right? How do you think about attracting folks and retaining folks? How do you apply your resources to your open enrollees and your new residents, your current student base, right? And what do you have to offer them that's unique or different? Quality instructors, hopefully, right? Do you have a lot of college credits? Do you have extracurriculars? What is that thing? You have all of that stuff. You have gorgeous facilities. What is the thing that you really want to kind of put out there? And you can think about costs. That's a tough one to get to. An example I would give you, a guy who's been a colleague and a mentor of mine, Al Brokop, runs the Monticello School District. He's been there 17 years, which I think that's like an eternity for school administrators these days. 17 years in one district is a very long time. And Al has worked really, really hard. 210 kids in the whole high school, 23 grads. He's got partnerships with Black Hawk Tech, and they got a group called the JAM Group. JAM, Judah, Albany, Monticello, Broadhead. It's the JAM Group. And they share technology and they share instructors so that these little bitty schools can get all of those dual enrollment credits to get their kids 303 transcripted credits, college credits out the door. 23 little kids, not little kids, 23 kids in that small district, right? Other stuff, the Board of Education reimburses based on performance, and 367,000. So Al's like pushing this stuff out there, and it's a tough district. I mean, they're still losing kids, but that's something they do profoundly well. They form collaborative partnerships to get there in these little districts. So as we jump off, I think this is my last slide or two. This is kind of the question as we think about long-range planning, community planning, school planning. What is it that makes us distinct and unique and pop to other folks? This is sometimes hard for local folks, is people aren't going to move here because you love your town, right? They got to see something that they love about your town. And when I work with folks who have forever and ever and ever and ever lived in the village of Albany or wherever, they love it because they grew up here and their granddad was here. That's not enough to attract an outsider, right? So we got to break our mindset a little bit and think about who's going to come here and what we got for them. Anyhow, happy slides. This place is beautiful. I'm from Ohio. I didn't know the Driftless existed until my wife drug me up here, and we're very happy. Cassville, sweet events. The Cassville, what is this? They had the Safe and Spooky Halloween. You got the Cobb Corn event, and so we got a lot of stuff to offer folks. I'm going to leave you on this happy, beautiful picture of this ugly dad and this beautiful kid. There's folks who will come here and celebrate your communities, right, and go to your districts, and so those are my strategy thoughts on why folks should choose Dodgeville. Thank you.
Is it on? It is. All right. Did everybody learn something here tonight? Yeah? Was it good? I think that for me, as I sat and listened, I think it was one of these last slides, you talked about the word care. And when you care about your community and want to make it the best for you as you live here, and want to make it the best for those that could live here, it's not hard to try and make decisions about maybe investments that you need to make in your community, whether it's as a volunteer or whether it's whether we have to make investments from a property tax standpoint or whatnot. And as we look at all these variables that we have to consider as we're making tough decisions at a school level, at a city level, at a county level, I think that it's good to have this type of information so that everyone understands that it's a bigger picture than, as I think Troy had mentioned, where, or maybe it was, I don't remember who said, you come to pay your taxes at the city clerk or at the town or village that you may live in or whatever municipality, and you're frustrated by that. There's just a lot more to this equation than people understand. And I think that as leaders in this community and new leaders that want to do good things for our community, we want you to know that there's a lot more behind the scenes that goes on, and we need everyone's participation in making this a great community that people want to live and work and raise families and all the things that is so great about this community.
Round of applause for Barry Hotman. I know I speak on many who are excited for the opportunity. I'm hoping feeling inspired in the lens of saying we're not alone in this next journey. We have partners in the work that we're doing, partners amongst the board, partners amongst our city councils, partners throughout Iowa County, partners across Southwest Wisconsin, partners across the state. And so it's one of those things that we want to continue to work together to try to figure out what is it about Dodgeville that why we choose it and why else might others want to choose it as well. So I think we'll transition into our next activity where our speakers will be available here tonight to answer your questions. You don't have to ask it in a public way here, but we do want to bring you up here to the stage where we've got some city maps and we want to look at where there might be some future developments. Where might there be some things that we want to start advertising more, because we do have great events that have gone on. And we do have some things that make people really do say, yeah, I'm glad that's in my hometown. And so we've got 3 different maps. We'll bring up some pencils, come up on stage, get a chance to socialize. If the person next to you, you don't know them, introduce yourself, because you were invited here tonight for a reason, because you are somebody in this community that we want to continue to lean on and continue to answer questions. We may not be able to convince everybody, but we can at least give people knowledge, give them facts, and so that they can sell the message moving forward. So thank you all for coming here tonight. Round of applause to each of you, and then come on up on stage.